Rebels claim to have entered Syria's second largest city.
Russian forces say they have entered Aleppo after rebels launch a surprise offensive in the government-controlled city for the first time in years. A statement by
Apparently some of these dudes were like trained by Ukrainian special forces too,
newly
right?
formed rebel umbrella coalition says clashes with Syrian forces intensified overnight into Friday morning. The rebels and Bashar al-Assad's regime had agreed to a ceasefire mediated by Russia and Turkey in March 2020. CNN's senior international correspondent Ben Wiedemann has covered Syria extensively over the course of his career. He joins us now to give us some perspective on the latest development. Ben, this is the first major escalation in Syria in around 7 years. Rebels claiming to have taken control of Aleppo's western countryside. What is the latest?
Yes, what we're hearing from Aleppo is they've now entered the new Aleppo neighborhood.
Yeah, no American or Israeli involvement at all. First of all, Turkish involvement is American involvement. Turkey is NATO. Turkey does not do anything in this region without America's go-ahead, which literally includes giving, selling oil that ISIS was extracting. Okay. So the idea that like this is happening without, I know you're being sarcastic. Sorry. I'm just using you as a jump off point. But once again, there are very valid reasons for Syrians to fight back against Assad. It's just true. Having said that, the some of the groups, at least like the Turkish backed groups, are not exactly great either. Like when they say rebels, it comprises of a group of people that includes American trained Kurdish militias that are secular or communist, all the way to it depends on which group you're talking about and what you're talking about, all the way to Al-Qaeda adjacent Salafists. Now, a lot of the Islamist rebel groups are also, no, it doesn't include rebels. The rebels are the FSA. Kurds are another thing. Yes, but I'm saying that like there's opposition forces on every side of this that ranges in ideology for different parts of Syria.
Neighborhood, as well as the Hamdaniya neighborhood on the western side of the city. This comes after they launched this sort of coalition of rebel groups led by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which is a rebel group that at one point was affiliated with al-Qaeda, but they launched this lightning offensive on Wednesday, and since then they've taken, according to them, 63 villages to the west of Aleppo, which of course is a...
I do think it's kind of funny when, listen, all I'm going to say is when you see people with guns going Allahu Akbar with Arabic lettering bands that they're wearing, and the American government is on board with them and showing them as like a good thing, it's just kind of funny to think about that. From the perspective of how they interpret and analyze the very similar images with genuinely different goals and genuinely different ambitions, mind you. But I never thought that it would be the 90s again, where I would see big bearded militia guys getting positive coverage on American mainstream news,
Is Syria's second largest city, and they say they have now entered the western edge.
How are these guys immediately identifiable as freedom fighters with the PFLP and PLO weren't? Yeah, no, they're not, because they're bad.
Of the city. This is an offensive that comes after keeping in mind, of course, that the rebels lost control of most of Aleppo back in 2016. And there's been basically a stalemate since March of 2020 when Russia and Turkey worked out a ceasefire agreement for the northern part of of Syria. Now, there have been clashes among the rebel groups themselves, but it appears that they've put their differences behind, perhaps to exploit the fact that, for instance, Hezbollah, which was a major backer of the regime of Bashar al-Assad, essentially pulled out of Syria starting in October of last year, when they focused their fire on Israel. And of course, other backers of the Syrian regime, for instance, Iran, has been distracted by its involvement in hostile activities with Israel, and Russia has been distracted by its war in Ukraine. And therefore, perhaps these rebel groups are seeing this as a golden opportunity to target a weakened Syrian regime, a regime that doesn't have the kind of backing that it enjoyed going back to, for instance, 2015, when the Russians became directly involved in bolstering the regime of Bashar al-Assad. So certainly this does represent a dramatic change on the ground in an area where the Syrian regime was starting to feel fairly confident. They've been trying to rebuild parts of old Aleppo that were severely damaged in the civil war that's been going on there since 2012. But it does appear that the regime has been taken by surprise by this rebel offensive. Eleni?
Indeed. I mean, a huge surprise.
I'm sorry for being dumb. Did I miss some context? Is it good for bad for Syria? There's nothing good for Syria. Syria is cooked and will continue to be cooked because Assad is not a good guy, but these rebel forces are also not exactly great. The only other the regional actor in this process is Turkey, which is operating at the behest of American foreign intervention, or at least working within the confines of what America allows it to do so, whether it be complete control over the northern Syrian corridor, or they engage in a whole bunch of bombing campaigns and military actions against the Kurdish villages and the Kurdish militias that are there fighting against the Turkish government. Some of the groups that Turkey backs in this process are also like direct, Salafist, former al-Qaeda militants and shit like that. So there is no good immediate resolution for Syria, no matter what. Also, people will interpret this as like, Hezbollah has been aligned with Assad, and so is Russia aligned with Assad as well. So it's you can look at it from many different angles. It could be a proxy war between U.S. and Russia with a civil war slammed into the middle of it. It is truly devastating for Syria, no matter what.
And they're calling it a shock offensive. What is their aim, Ben? And as you say, they're feeling emboldened now that Hezbollah and Iran are distracted with their own worries, specifically in what we're seeing in Lebanon. So what is their aim right now?
Well, what they've said, this Military Operations Command, which is the name of this umbrella for this coalition of rebel groups, they said that their aim was to stop Russian and Syrian regime forces.
What? POTUS today bought Rashid Khalidi's The 100 Years War on Palestine? Wow, man, he's gonna get woke. he's gonna learn today. He's gonna learn a lot. Yeah, little late for that, don't you think, Biden?
Is from targeting.
Oh yeah, look at this map. You got the Syrian regime. You have the Syrian rebels. You have Kurdish forces, and then you have Turkey-backed forces, and then you have the U.S. partner forces, and you have Islamic State fighters. Look at this map and tell me this is a good situation. We just can't leave anything the fuck alone. It's like it's Iraq, it's Afghanistan, it is oversimplified, but why is our ally Turkey fighting the other ally, the Kurds? Because America doesn't give a shit about the Kurds that much. Because Turkey is a established state and the second largest military in NATO. So America will always use the Kurds. They will arm them. We will give them weapons. We will give them training, and we'll use them as a tool. We'll use them as a militia to sick on everyone in the region if we want to, if we choose to. And the Kurds are like, we're 35 million displaced. We do not have a nation state for ourselves in this entire region. Parts of the Kurds live in, Syria. Parts of the Kurds live in Iraq. Parts of the Kurds live in Turkey and and Iran as well. So for them, it's like, okay, yeah, we'll take the weapons. Thank you. Like, it doesn't even matter. That's why America was working with, Kurds in Rojava that were doing an international communist call to arms and training them. America doesn't give a as long as it aids and abets the destabilization until it becomes a large problem, until it becomes like a real problem for them. In which case they will then fund the Islamists, which they are by way of Turkey, and sick them on the Kurdish militias that they previously were funding and offering logistical support to. How is Turkey different from the U.S.-backed forces on this map? It's not. Turkey's interest is potentially to maintain the northern Syrian corridor, as you can see here, and then inevitably overtake more and more of that territory, and then potentially engage in a population transfer, or at least I think that was the initial goal. I don't know if they're actually going to continue along with that goal, where They would displace the Kurds that were living in the villages and create villages that are basically controlled by, like, to some degree controlled by Turkish governance, like put muhtars in positions of power in local governments, and repopulate the area, not with Turks, of course, but with Syrian Arab Syrians that have been displaced that now live in Turkey. That was their goal. And their reasoning for this, I don't agree with this, by the way, but their stated purpose for this was to maintain security in their southern border, right? State shit. America's very aware of this goal and is seemingly on board with it because Turkey is a NATO ally. Turkey is the second largest military in NATO, so they get to do this kind of stuff.
Idlib province.
Yeah, the Turkish-backed forces are interesting as well because on the one hand, Turkey actually is getting closer and closer to China in economic development, but also on the other hand, some of the Turkish forces are Turkmen forces from other Turkic nations that have been trained by the Turkish military, including but not limited to Uyghur separatist forces that are some of them are even Islamist, as a matter of fact. So while they're on the one hand, they're training Turkic forces like the Uyghurs from Xinjiang all the way from China that are now fighting in Syria. And that's a tiny number. It's not a massive number of people. On the other hand, they are also getting closer to China in economic cooperation. There's now an EV factory that I believe is being built in Turkey as well. So once again, Turkey is playing all sides to come out on top. That's the Erdogan move. Because also, Turkey is aligned with Russia on certain economic partnerships, but also simultaneously funding the Ukrainian resistance against Russia. Bayraktar, the very famous drone that Turkey created, has played a very important role in Ukrainian defense. Turkey is really an incomprehensible, oftentimes, and very interesting partner in this process. What is this? But yeah, once again, you must remember they are at the table. Suriye Milli Ordusu Fırat Kalkanı cephe hattını açarak Özgürlük Şafağı operasyonunu durdurdu. Tadif'te SMO kurtuluş ve inşa hareketleri ile Suriye rejimi milisleri arasında şiddetli çatışmalar yaşanıyor. Syrian National Army announced Operation Dawn of Freedom by opening the Euphrates Shield front line. Violent conflicts are taking place in Tadif between the SMO liberation and the construction movement and the Syrian regime militia. How is Turkey able to do that? Mexico starts building Chinese factories and everyone loses their minds. I mean, I don't think America likes that Mexico is building Chinese factories either. But also, Turkey is really far away from the United States of America. Why do Turks think you support the PKK? Because you support Kurdish emancipation? I think it's funny because I think there is one guy who supports the PKK openly that is unique. That was unexpected. Am I crazy? Didn't Bahçeli? Wait, hold on. Yeah. So the Turkish ultranationalist movement, also known as MHP, is an incredibly far-right anti-Kurdish paramilitary group that was created by the CIA. Just remember, if you want to understand how complicated this situation is and how insane this situation is, that guy on the right is Devlet Bahçeli. His entire political movement was designed by NATO as a Turkish Gladio. Basically, the ultranationalist movement in Turkey is a complete American project. These are the Grey Wolves. These are the guys that do this, okay? So he is the last guy that you would expect to say something like this. PKK's leader, Öcalan, Abdullah Öcalan, who is in perma jail in Turkey. Recently, Erdogan's ally, the ultranationalist Devlet Bahçeli, came out and made a call for the government to allow the pro-Kurdish party to meet with the jailed PKK leader Öcalan, despite the ongoing crackdown on Kurdish politicians since his calls last month. Your streams make me realize how much my education failed me. No, you don't need to know all this shit, dude. Come on. This is definitely way more fucking complicated than any number of things that schools could teach you. It's like, this is the obscure Warhammer lore of politics. Yes.
Province and parts of western Aleppo province that are under the rebel control, that they've been targeted by Russian and regime artillery and airstrikes. So they say that the purpose was to put an end to those strikes, but clearly they see that the regime is feeling exposed, that it doesn't have the kind of backing that it had until quite recently, and clearly they're seeing that this is an opportunity to go after, to try to retake Aleppo, which, of course, keep in mind, it's not only the second largest city in Syria, it really is the industrial heartland rather the industrial sort of center of Syria, and it would be
Oh, no, I didn't leave that out. I brought that up too. Sorry. You leave out Russia and IRGC directly helping SAA and fighting for the regime. No. That's why I said it could be determined as a proxy war as well. So no, I didn't bring that. I didn't forget that. I actually did bring it up. That is the other side of the equation. But no, I did. I brought it up originally when I was trying to display the different sides in play.
a major achievement for them to retake that city, and after a period when it was thought that the opposition was essentially isolated in Idlib province, and the regime was slowly regaining control of some of the country. Keep in mind, of course, that Syria.
Yeah, we'll refer to Charles Lister's analysis on this. He's the director of the Middle East Institute Syria program. He goes into detail about the different forces and their background, ideological and the like.
Yeah.
In addition to the rebels, there's a Turkish military presence, an American military presence, a Russian military presence. Basically, the country is cut up in pieces, and the regime's control at the best of times has been tenuous in many parts of the country.
Ben Wiedemann, always great to see you. Thank you so much.
I think a major part of this has been that Assad captured Aleppo with massive Russian air power and Iran-aligned militias such as Hezbollah in 2016. Now Russia is tied down in Ukraine, and Hezbollah just fought a bruising war with Israel and Lebanon. They're not here to help this time. Yeah, no, that definitely plays a role here. Like that, I think this is seen as an opportunity for all of the anti-Assad forces in the region, and also any kind of like Western interference in the region. Because I guess what's the opposite? Eastern interference, like. All these other groups that have normally played a formative role in defending the Assad regime are not as capable at this point to do so. So everyone is getting their licks in and striking in this moment of opportunity for them. Problem is, and I can't stress this enough, no one involved is good. Like there is no, if you're looking for like a perfect dynamic of heroic figures, like even people with valid claims against the Assad regime that want to overthrow it are still technically working at the behest of in many instances, getting logistical training and support, including but not limited to my friend Brace Belden, who I've had on this broadcast, who literally did go and fight in Rojava against ISIS. Like they got training from the CIA. They got training from the United States of America. They got weapons from the USA. A broad spectrum of armed opposition groups are involved in the ongoing assault on Aleppo, but make no mistake, it wouldn't be happening if not for HTS, a group I've studied closely for 12 years with some useful articles. Pragmatic jihadists or opportunistic warlord, HTS's Jalani expands its rule in northern Syria. The fight for supremacy in northwest Syria on HTS's break from al-Qaeda and its wholesale defeat of al-Qaeda and ISIS in the northwest. How al-Qaeda lost control over Syrian affiliate, the inside story, a lengthy paper revealing exclusive details on HTS's break up from al-Qaeda. So these guys are former al-Qaeda. In recent years, HTS has built a semi-technocratic government, the Syrian Salvation Government, with a trained police force, service provision, and an aid sector, health programming, and more. The SSG works directly with the UN aid programming for 2 million IDPs. Beyond governance, HTS has invested heavily in military development since the 2020 ceasefire in northwestern Syria. With intense fighter development and training, multiple SOF-type units were developed for covert ops, lightning raids, nighttime ops, and more. HTS's Asaib al-Hamra force has led daytime advances in recent days, where Saraya al-Harari assumed front lines at night. Every fighter equipped with thermal scopes on assault rifles, sniper rifles, and RPGs, plus night vision equipped ISR drones. HTS and several aligned factions surged money into indigenous weapons development since 2020, into drone tech, Israel or ISR, and armed rocketry and cruise missile type systems, all of which have been revealed in use over the past 3 days. It's been game changing. While it's yet to be revealed, I'm told multiple deep tunnels were used to infiltrate regime held areas of rural western Aleppo in the first stage of the offensive, and covert sleeper cells were activated to attack from the inside Assad held areas simultaneously. These are the former al-Qaeda, while the opposition offenses of years past might have demonstrated some success, they were affected by leaks and terrible OPSEC. Past 72 hours have demonstrated a remarkable improvement in control coordinated comms practice that makes a big difference. When COVID first entered Syria in 2020, HTS led the fastest and most efficient health response mask mandate mobile and field clinics through their emergency response committee. The ERC is already clearing up newly captured areas of Aleppo and combing for explosives. For 2 years, HTS's leadership has been trying to rebuild trust with northwestern Syrian minorities, especially the Christian and the Druze. Churches have reopened in Kunaya and Yakubiya in Idlib after rebuilding and repairs by HTS companies. Oh, Channel 4 did a piece on it as well.
On the move, at pace. For years, the front lines of Syria's civil war have seemed frozen. This week, they've shattered. These are the insurgent fighters of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, listed a terror group by the UN Security Council. Since Wednesday, they've made lightning gains from the forces of the Syrian regime of Bashar al-Assad and his Russian and Iranian allies, seizing dozens of villages, closing in on the big prize, Aleppo.
These are areas where the Iranian militia and the Assad militia were stationed and were bombing civilians. And now, praise be to God, after their expulsion from these areas, God willing, the civilians will return to their homeland.
This evening, HTS fighters had reached the center of Aleppo, removing the Syrian flag flying next to a statue of Assad's brother. Regime defenses reported to have withdrawn in disarray. But from the air, Syrian and Russian planes and drones have been fighting back. The UN says 27 civilians have been.
This isn't direct CIA. This is a cutout from Turkey. I mean, it is still CIA, but it's CIA and Turkey by way of Turkey.
Killed in the renewed fighting. Aid agencies say 14,000 people have been displaced. If the speed of this assault has surprised, it hasn't come from nowhere. Last month, the UN Special Envoy to Syria warned of the risk of a military, economic and humanitarian storm breaking there. While Bashar al-Assad has been readmitted to the Arab Leaders Club here in Riyadh this month, his key military allies have been distracted.
I'm laughing because seeing Western media look at former Al-Qaeda guys and being like, look at these brave rebels is once again a somber reminder that it just doesn't matter. I just spent the last 12 months trying to explain to people how Islamist fundamentalism is not a key factor in Hamas's development, and how they have a singular goal of ending the siege, ending the apartheid, and ending the occupation and liberating Palestinians from the Israeli apartheid. And regardless of their tactics, or regardless of how my disagreements that I might have with some of the leadership or whatever the fuck, that goal still remains. And yet the way you look at it, they're like, Hamas is ISIS. The way Americans look at it is like, nah, you don't understand. Hamas is ISIS. Hamas is ISIS. And then now we look at actual ISIS style guys and we're like, no, these are the brave rebels. Something doesn't add up in the way that the media is messaging.
By their own concerns, Russia with Ukraine, Iran with Israel. Israel has also been intensifying its strikes on Iranian and Hezbollah targets inside Syria, further opening up opportunities for the anti-regime militias. The rebel stronghold of Idlib has, though, been under heavy attack from the air. This war, never fully dormant, is now resurgent. And even as Syrians in Aleppo celebrate tonight the ejection of regime forces, they know from bitter experience just how much deadlier things can still get from here.
Yeah. Gulf/Israel funded fighters good, Iran allied fighters bad. Yeah, it just doesn't fucking matter, dude. No matter what happens, just regular Syrian people get killed in the process, destroyed in the fucking process. Yeah, we always pick and choose when it comes to these rebel groups. We did the same with the Mujahideen in the 80s. It's only if they fight our enemies for us and they don't care if free or not. And Afghanistan is actually a perfect example of this as well, because the Afghan government itself, the communist-aligned Afghan, USSR-aligned Afghan government, was also fucking ruthless and brutal. So brutal that the USSR itself was intervening against the USSR-aligned government at the time. But then so were the Russians. When they went into Afghanistan, they were also ruthless. And then America, that had already primed and radicalized and funded and given training and weapons to these Mujahideen groups, then inevitably played a major role in the creation of the Taliban, which then, succeeded as the Afghan government. Then another one of these guys that we had trained and funded and facilitated and helped decided, I actually don't really like that America is interfering in the affairs of the Middle East. So I'm going to go and do 9/11. And that's precisely what happened. okay, former rebel slash good guy, communism killer, turned into the arch terrorist of all time after doing 9/11. His name was bin Laden. And it's like, I can talk about the history of these things over and over and over again, and it doesn't matter to people. They do not care. They do not understand it, or rather, they find it to be too complicated, or rather, they want to just see good, bad dynamics at play. Quick PBS report, an interview with Jelani, the head of HTS in Idlib.
I came to this story.
Like, if I was playing this on mute with no subtitles, you'd be like, oh, these are bad guys. Like, that's what Americans are primed into thinking. And in some respects, they're not good guys either, okay? But they happen to be guys that are against the other bad guys that we don't like.
Fully aware of the controversy it would generate, I would be speaking to a designated terrorist. But after 20 years of covering the region, I thought this was an important opportunity. Since bin Laden in 1998, no senior al-Qaeda leader has agreed to a televised interview with a Western reporter. Today, Jelani, who says he's long since broken with al-Qaeda, controls Syria's last opposition stronghold.
He said that was the real, that was the old me, man. That was the old me. Chill.
A safe haven for refugees from around the country. If he falls, many more migrants could flood north.
Bro, calm down. We did a little bit of that, what they call terrorism. Okay, chill out.
Jelani's 10,000-plus man army, effectively backed by Turkey, is now the only thing that prevents it. There are some people in Washington who think it may be wise to work with Jelani, including a top American diplomat.
Yeah, that's so funny. Interesting. So they're backed by Turkey, but then they're like, well, some in the Washington consider it to be wise to actually back those guys. Okay, you already said that America is backing those guys. Turkey's backing those guys.
In the region during the Bush, Obama, and Trump administrations. James Jeffrey.
Look, he's the least bad option of the various options on Idlib, which is one of the most important places in Syria, which is one of the most important places right now in the Middle East. When there is
Are we considering al-Qaeda good now? Is America's position that al-Qaeda is good? Yes, they are. And it's funny because like a lot of the shit and a lot of the opinions and a lot of the things that these guys have done are you know, straightforwardly worse than anything. This is what they claim Hamas is doing, but they don't have any kind of similar nuance in the way that they interpret Hamas's actions or any number of different like Palestinian resistance groups. They're all terrorists. Their family members also terrorists. They all need to die. That's it.
not the normal setup of nation states and of international norms and rules, you wind up with...
You act like America directly funds these guys, but forget that Russia and Iran directly fought them in Syria without any American aid in terms of air support or the same amount of weapons like Ukraine. Wait, no, I'm not forgetting that. Why do people keep talking? I'm talking about America's intervention in the region. And everyone immediately goes, well, what about Hezbollah and Russia? Yes, they are the guys who are backing the Assad regime. And they're the ones who are fighting against these guys. I wrote plenty. Sadly, the revolution got diluted with so many foreign players that that want their own interests in the region. It doesn't matter who backs who. We need to understand that the start of this was a revolution against a dictator who used chemical weapons to genocide his own people. Now, however, foreign countries picked sides for their own interests. It's very well known that the dictator of Syria committed crimes against my people, my family included, were killed with chemical weapons. And we know what happens in the face of massive oppression. Conservative groups rise to prominence and poor majority cling to them for hope. Please make it obvious that Assad, backed by Iran, literally kills so many innocent Syrians, my family included. It is so unfair for people to misunderstand the beginning of this revolution. The main point of contention is Assad being a sadistic dictator that held Syria for years and people had enough. He went to Iran and Russia for help, and people started thinking because Iran helps him, he's good. It's really not that simple. I don't think it's. I am saying that it's not that simple. We're not in disagreement as far as the analysis. Like, I'm not one of these like Assad is the line of Syria. Assad is a good guy. Like, I mean, I meme about that shit. Allah Surya Bashar, but no, I'm not like a pro-Assad person. But I'm also not pro-Turkey in this situation either. So, like, the way I interpret Assad is not dissimilar to the way I look to Saddam Hussein or even late-stage Gaddafi. All of these guys have done a bunch of up things, but they were in the crosshairs of America. They were in the crosshairs of Western interest, and in their absence, I mean, you can look to Iraq and what happened in Iraq. You can look to what happened in Libya. The efforts always should be not to interfere or intervene with direct military involvement, beef up and radicalize different militant factions, because ultimately it always turns into instability and more violence and a significantly worse outcome for the populations overall. Anyway.
Groups like this that do things you don't like, but in the here and now are the folks you have to deal with to avoid even worse things.
How can you trust somebody that's just trying to survive and continue to remain in power?
There are people that have met with Jelani who are saying we should give him a chance.
I think it's letting him and the organization off the hook.
Aaron Zelen, editor of Jihadology.
I spent 7 days in Idlib, seeing, of course, what Jelani wanted me to see, and hearing what he wanted me to hear. I also spoke to his critics and his victims.
Jelani told me that we don't torture. There is no torture in our prisons.
That's a difficult one to believe.
Come on, dude. I like that given the normative violence that exists in the area, you change the standards a little bit. Like they're one step removed from pink washing, which is no torture washing.
I mean, we have testimony that says otherwise.
هناك تعذيب وهناك تعذيب وحشي وهناك أساليب همجية جدا في التعامل بهؤلاء المجرمين الإرهابيين.
Jelani, they say, is a man that can't be trusted. I've come here to investigate.
Wait, did they do it? Oh, this is June. Wait, where's the full one? I want to watch the jihadist. Abu Muhammad al-Jelani, a former leader of an al-Qaeda affiliate in Syria, is one of the most wanted men in the world. I mean, there's journalistic value here. Oh yeah, no, I'll never discount people going and interviewing leaders of al-Qaeda. Even I've talked about like the importance of even interviewing someone like Osama bin Laden. They're trying to Lufify him, the most wanted man in the world. No, it's like my naysayers that yelled at me for interviewing a Yemeni teenager who said he wasn't a part of the Ansar Allah family or the political movement cannot hold a candle to what kind of positive coverage you're getting all the way back in 2021 of a guy who was, an al-Qaeda leader.
I'm flying over southern Turkey. I'm on my way to Syria to meet one of the most wanted men in the world.
You have not spoken to an American reporter in the past. So why have you chosen now to speak to the United States?
His name is Abu Muhammad al-Jelani. As a former al-Qaeda leader, the U.S. has a $10 million reward for information leading to his capture. He heads the Organization for the Liberation of the Levant, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the most powerful.
Yeah, his name is Jelani, means Golani. His family are from occupied Syria and Golan Heights.
Powerful Islamist faction in Syria. He has agreed to meet because he is trying to overhaul his image.
Not much is known about its leader, Abu Muhammad al-Julani. He joined al-Qaeda.
In the past, he's battled Americans in Iraq. He's deployed suicide bombers in Syria. And to this day, he stands accused of imprisoning and torturing his critics.
You're recognized, you're designated as a terrorist by the United States, by the United Nations, by many governments. What do you say to them?
This dude gave up $10 million to not give him up to the U.S. Remember that. Brother, what are you talking about? Why do you think PBS is doing a somewhat positive piece on him? He's not getting arrested by our guys. He is our guy.
لم نشكل أي تهديد على المجتمع الغربي أو المجتمع الأوروبي لا تهديد أمني ولا تهديد اقتصادي ولا أي شيء
We sat down together in a secure location in Idlib province in northwest Syria. He insists that today, Americans should trust him.
Why does he want it? Because he's an al-Qaeda leader, brother. Al-Qaeda, you know, the guys who did 9/11.
Pledged allegiance to al-Qaeda. You worked with Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the emir of ISIS. So for you to say...
Oh, yeah, that too.
...that you were not committed to fighting Americans when that's in your past is impossible for people to understand.
لكن دعنا نسأل ما هو السبب لانتماء هؤلاء الناس
لتنظيم Why did they join Al-Qaeda? That's the question. Bro's about to be like, listen, the material circumstances are what radicalizes people into joining Al-Qaeda, which is a bad group. I've decided it's a bad group now. I've seen the light. My bad for ever being anti-America. They were the good guys all along.
I came to this story fully aware of the controversy it would generate. I would be speaking to a designated terrorist. But after 20 years of covering the region, I thought this was an important opportunity. Since bin Laden in 1998, no senior al-Qaeda leader has agreed to a televised interview with a Western reporter. Today, Jelani, who says he's long since broken with al-Qaeda, controls Syria's last opposition stronghold, a safe haven for refugees from around the country. If he falls, many more migrants could flood north. Jelani's 10,000-plus man army, effectively backed by Turkey, is now the only thing that prevents it. There are some people in Washington who think it may be wise to work with Jelani, including a top American diplomat in the region during the Bush, Obama, and Trump administrations, James Jeffrey.
Look, he's the least bad option of the various options on Idlib, which is one of the most important places in Syria, which is one of the most important places right now in the Middle East. When there is not the normal setup of nation states and of international norms and rules, you wind up with groups like this that do things you don't like, but in the here and now are the folks you...
I just want to point out once again that you would never hear an American person, like an American in a leadership position, say this about Hezbollah or Hamas or any number of different groups that are within the axis of resistance against America and Israel. They will never offer any sort of nuanced perspective on how people get radicalized or how people behave in the ways that they do, and lesser evil voting or anything like that.